Have you seen this? If you are a fan of Chinatown and decades-late sequels like Independence Day Resurgence, Blues Brothers 2000, and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, have we got a treat for you.
Welcome to Have You Seen This?
The world's only podcast about obscure, overlooked, and misbegotten media.
All discussions will be spoiler heavy.
You have been warned.
That's good. I like it.
All right, good.
Have we got a turd for you?
A turd sandwich. Everyone, when you're a detective in L.A., everything's a turd sandwich, and you got to take a bite.
You know what Chinatown needed?
What?
Really obvious narration.
Yeah, like the Blade Runner narration, I think, is owed an apology to once you see in context the two Jakes narration.
The two Jakes, more like the two jerks.
Right, that's us right now.
Yeah, we're the
Talking
jerks for
about
watching this and talking about it.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, and you know, speaking of jerks, I owe Wet Hot American Summer an apology because this is the worst movie that I've seen for this podcast.
Well, speaking of Wet Hot American Summer, really quick before we polish this turd, as our loyal listeners know, our last episode was extremely contentious. Although I think the last episode that dropped was Fatal Beauty with Jacques from Seeking Derangements, which was delightful.
Even more contentious.
Well, we had a good time discussing Fatal Beauty because that movie is fucking wild.
I had a good time watching it.
Well,
yeah.
You know, you have to get your joy where you can with when you make this show. No, we kind of cursed ourselves, I guess. But the thing about Wet Hot American Summer is that, you know, when you have an argument with someone about, like, you know, some, like, some contention about taste or whatnot, or, you know, maybe you're in a political argument, and there's always that little bit of self-doubt in your mind where you're like, wow, maybe I am wrong. Maybe this movie actually does suck. And then when I posted that we were going to cover it, and, you know, wait... Here comes the episode. By the way, Tim and I really, argued over this one. I got a ton of replies from people that are like, what? Like, that movie's great. I love that movie.
Yeah, I mean, I have friends who cheer me up when I'm, you know, wrong, too. But...
Well, did you see the comment we got on our Patreon?
No.
No, in fact, let's do this in real time. Go to the post on our Patreon page and take a look at the comments.
Cripes. Okay. Well, first I gotta log out of my Patreon alt.
Oh, for all your
this money goes to, well, I don't
pornography.
Want to get into. It's
pornography.
Not technically pornography. It is.
It's a pornography shop. You're funding pornography.
Okay. It was just a 2-word review.
Yes. Well, anyway, you all can go look at the post if you're curious, but I am currently designing Tim Sucks t-shirts, which will be going on Redbubble very shortly, so look for the link.
This is what, you know, Patreon is all about. It's that direct connection with the fans.
Exactly, and we appreciate all of you and your comments, your replies. So please continue to provide that because I did get a good laugh out of it. But right, so
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, having concluded that business,
yeah, on to new business.
Yeah, and speaking of the two Jakes, from
You know, yeah, speaking of things that really suck.
Yeah, and this episode I don't think will be contentious because I think Tim and I are of one mind about this picture.
We aren't going to have Robert Evans on to defend it.
Well, that motherfucker's dead, so fuck him.
Yeah, well, what do you say, Bob? Nothing?
Yeah, couldn't even fucking show up. Like, just fucking typical. But
lazy.
When I mentioned on our Twitter account that I was going to view and speak about the two Jakes, and yeah, I said this in a negative way, let's say. And I apologize to this person if you are indeed a listener. I hope that I don't hurt your feelings in this episode. But their response was, what is it about that movie that's bad?
Well, strap in.
Yeah, where to start? So we really appreciate you, the listeners, for speaking to us, those of us who crush your dreams and kick sand in your face. Thank you. But this was a kind of a cursed project from the beginning. Of course,
it got kicked around for a while.
Yeah. Do we even need to explain Chinatown?
I think our listeners at least have a passing familiarity with Chinatown.
I think so.
It was directed by a pederast.
Right. And interestingly, Polanski...
But that's not the great thing about it.
Well, I learned a couple of interesting things about Chinatown, which I actually didn't know when I viewed it again a few days ago. And of course, it holds up. Who knew?
Good.
I remember...
I'm glad.
I was sitting there. I finished it at like 1 a.m., and I've seen it a few times. And, you know, there's always the question like, hey, will it still hold up? And, you know, so it was at 1 a.m. I was sitting there in the living room, like just quietly devastated because it doesn't matter how many times you see it. It's just so perfectly structured. And the tragedy of it is so profound that it hits you every single time, no matter how much you've seen it. And like everything about it is so good. Interestingly, Polanski seemingly treated Chinatown as kind of a work-for-hire project. Like, he came in...
He had some stuff going on in his life at the time, though, that informed the work.
Well, I believe that it was in 77 that he was obliged to flee the country. So I assume that maybe around the time of Chinatown, he was just, like, super busy, like, procuring and grooming teenage girls.
Just packing.
Yeah, so, you know, he was really, you know, he was a busy guy. And so maybe that was why he treated Chinatown kind of like a work-for-hire thing. But what I didn't know is that he and Robert Towne, the screenwriter of Chinatown and The Two Jakes, they had disagreed about the ending. Towne wanted kind of a more, optimistic ending where Evelyn Mulwray...
Yeah, just kind of a rote ending.
Yeah, where like Evelyn Mulwray was not killed at the end. And Polanski argued very strenuously for the downer ending that you get in the version that came out, which I think makes it like much more memorable and devastating. So
yeah, as I recall, like his point was that, you know, beautiful women die in, Hollywood all the time. Look what happened to Sharon.
Right. So that was interesting to learn, and it maybe clarified a little.
Like that the first domino is, singer-songwriter Charles Manson not being able to meet the Beach Boys, and, the big domino is Chinatown.
Someone make that meme. I recommend imageflip.com if you don't have easy access to photo editing software. But the point I was getting at is that it may be clarified a little bit for me because, if you watch a movie like, and, admittedly this is a failing of myself, you watch a movie like Chinatown and you get this impression, especially a screenwriter like Towne who had just had like a trifecta of incredibly well-regarded films. I think that it went Last Detail, Shampoo, and Chinatown. And he received Oscar nominations like 3 years in a row for those movies. They're just like, classics. But then you watch The Two Jakes and you're like, oh, like, even very great artists have feet of clay. And, so that, that's that. Now, this was initially conceived as the second installment of a trilogy. It was all about L.A. and the development of L.A. Chinatown is obviously about water. The Two Jakes, you could argue, is about, fire, energy.
Gas? Yeah, earth, wind, and fire. It's all in there.
It's a big bag of gas. And then the final installment was supposed to take place in, I've heard different things, the 50s or the late 60s, and was supposed to be about air and no-fault divorce. And it was going to be called Giddies versus Giddies. Now, I know that...
yeah, that would have been 68.
Yeah. And I know that a kind of a boring plot point in Two Jakes is Jake Giddy's fiance leaving him near the end of the movie. And it's just like, so what? Like, why should we care? We've never seen these two interact apart from a phone conversation. I don't know. Maybe they made up, and then that would have led to Giddies versus Giddies, but it never happened because Two Jakes was kind of a disaster. It did not recoup its money at the box office. And just watching it is currently available on HBO Max, along with Chinatown. Obviously, we recommend Chinatown. If you don't know that it's really good, you should watch it.
If ever you should watch half of a double feature, this would be it.
Right. The Two Jakes is on... Damn, you're fast.
You're welcome.
Tim just sent me the meme that we just described, so nice. But I'll post it with the show notes.
Yeah. Go for it.
Chinatown and Two Jakes are both streaming on HBO Max currently. We can heartily recommend one and not the other. Now, we can probably get more into the, kind of the agonizing production of this movie. We can certainly talk about the movie itself. One thing that I want to ask right off the bat is, and I don't know if I am committing heresy by even asking this question, but when I started this movie, I was like, why does this look like shit? It looks like a fucking TV show. It looks like a prestige TV show that from the 2000s that, like, nobody watched.
Oh, yeah, we haven't discussed Wild Palms.
Ooh.
Perhaps we should.
No, we haven't.
No.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. If you want to hear about... If you want to hear about Wild Palms, leave us a comment or hit us up at info@haveyouseen.us.
Yeah, it was sort of the Twin Peaks also ran of a sort. Speaking of things that have lost their way and derailed, we were talking about the Two Jakes.
Right, because the question I posed was, and the reason that I say, like, is this heresy to ask this question is because it was fucking shot by Vilmos Zsigmond, like, who is generally regarded as a very fine cinematographer. But there's just it's kind of emblematic of the wrongness of this movie. Like, it just feels wrong. Like, the tone is wrong, the look is wrong, and that's in spite of a lot of money having been spent to make it period accurate, and for the the production design is fine, but just the way it's shot, and like a lot of like Nicholson, because Nicholson did end up directing the film himself.
Yeah, in the same way that, like, when all the generals have been shot, like the Private First Class, you're in charge now. Like,
right.
All right.
And we can get into that.
We know you aren't leaving the picture, so you can get to direct it now.
Yeah, and it's not like, and it isn't as though Nicholson hadn't directed before. He had done Drive, he said, in 1971 and Going South in 1978. Like, neither being exactly gangbusters at the box office, but, they have their adherents.
He's kind of the bag holder director at this point.
Right. And so I don't want to just be like, oh, he sucks, he's shit, but like I just really question a lot of his like shot choices. Like it just looks like a fucking television show to me. Am I crazy?
I couldn't really tell you because I tuned out of this TV show in the same way that I did with Wild Palms. Like I'm watching it, but nothing is impacting me.
Right,
I'm
and if you
looking at
guys
it, I'm
are
seeing things happen.
right, and if you guys are hoping that we will illuminate the plot somewhat, like that's probably not going to happen.
I'm not fucking with that plot. Yeah,
it was so I was like, I don't understand why any of this is happening. But I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, that was all I was saying. It is so just so poorly paced, and the way that information is doled out. I know that it is there are supposed to be some things that, a movie like this, a noir movie, would, play, close to the vest. But there is still an artistry to laying out these clues to keep the audience engaged, and it just doesn't have that. It is, like Jen's saying, it's just so dumbly executed that it fails to hold one's interest. I mean, to have this as a follow-up to Wet Hot American Summer, like, I almost feel bad for how much I lambasted that movie, because this is just such a slog. It is. It's ridiculously overlong. And it's... Yeah, pacing is bad, shots are bad, performances, the story, the script.
Do you remember that show on AMC called Remember When? It was about like an old-timey radio station or some shit. Sorry, I do not. That's what it feels like. Is like I'm watching like some really middling cable show, like period cable show from the 90s. Mm-hmm. And middling is a good word. Yeah, and I would really like to know, I mean, people can tell me if I'm crazy or not. Go, if you have HBO Max, go and, don't, for God's sake, don't watch it. But take a look at maybe like the first 10 or 20 minutes. Yeah, fast forward like 5 minutes in, stick around for another 5, and then be like, what? There was a DVD and later a Blu-ray, I want to say like in the mid-2000s, which I believe Nicholson took part in himself, and which apparently he said that he made a couple of tweaks to the movie, but, it's the proverbial turd, and you're standing there with a bottle of shoe polish and a rag, like, what the fuck do I do with this? He says he took out some narration. If only he had cut out about 30 minutes of it. What? He says he took out some narration. And I was like, why did you leave any of it in? Because the narration is awful. Yeah, and he also says, there were too many music cues. Also, like, speaking, Tim, as you said, like, wow, like, following Wet Hot American Summer with this, following Jerry Goldsmith's score for Chinatown with whatever the fuck Van Dyke Parks thought he was doing with this one, like... I couldn't even tell you. Fuck. Like, it occurred to me when I was rewatching Chinatown the other night, like, I was like, God, I love this score. This is maybe, like, one of the best fucking scores of, like, any movie I've ever seen. Like, it's so... It is so beautiful. And then in this movie, you literally, like... the scene where, like, Madeline Stowe is, like, fucking shit up in his office? Right, yeah. And then there's, like, I swear, there's, like, a couple of, like, little, like, kind of, like, comedy music stings. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, tonally, this movie is fucked. And following on the heels of a movie like Chinatown, which handles, like, tonal shifts so well, because it's in the same movie where, like, the main character tells, like, an incredibly crass joke in front of a strange woman. Mm-hmm. But it fits into the tone of the film. It's telling you something about, Jake Gittes as a character. Yeah. And in this, like, it all plays like bad comedy. Well, yeah, bad something or other. Not just that, but one of the things that I had a problem with about the tone of the movie is, I think, because we've been talking about, what big shoes Chinatown has for this movie to fill, and there's a lot of, as I guess one would have done at the time, it being, 1948, and maybe if people were poor, they'd, pad out their shoe leather with, sheets of newspaper. The
the movie kind of does the same thing, where it's papering its nest with pieces of Chinatown to fill itself up, because it is ultimately on its own kind of an empty vessel. It is trading in a lot of the nostalgia of the original Chinatown in that it's invoking a lot of the same characters. So when it's left to stand on its own, there just is so little there, and little of interest as well.
Right, and I also feel like, I mean, I had seen most of the movie before, but all I remembered was like, wow, this really sucks compared to Chinatown. But I feel like, and one example of like how kind of sloppy this movie was is how easy it is to figure out just who Meg Tilly's character is supposed to be. Right.
Yeah. Speaking of, trading on familiar characters, this movie is basically like fan service before we had a name for it.
It's like somebody posted like a bloated, like multi-chapter Chinatown fan fiction to like fanfiction.net or something, or like an archive of our own. It was like, oh, like I continued the story of Chinatown. Like, leave kudos and comment, please. Nobody ever comments on my fics.
Yeah, it does really sound like that. Not only because because it takes place 20 years later.
No, it's like 10. Because I think
10?
Chinatown was set like 37 or 38.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my mistake. Can't do math.
It doesn't matter. Don't beat yourself up.
But yeah, it is. Right. Hey, if they can release the 2 Jakes in theaters, I can be off by a decade. So the like what you're saying about the fanfic tone of it is that now we reconnect with Jake Gittes, but like he's all successful and he's this big private investigator, and they got like this nice office and everything, and it has that same sort of fanfic wish fulfillment sort of now we at the top kind of swagger,
right?
Which isn't fun or interesting for like a character to like be patting themselves on the back and be like, oh, and then everything went well for me because I was so good at my job. Then they gave me the key to the city, and I don't know, Madeline Stowe blew me.
Oh God, I pity Madeline Stowe in this role, and it was so funny because when you texted me saying like, yeah, like her sex scene is really bad, and then that like while I was watching it, and then that came up, and I was like, oh my God, oh Jesus fucking Christ. But we'll get to that too, because fuck. But a point.
But we're talking about this, borrowing a lot of its gravitas from the previous movie and sounding like fanfic.
I specifically wanted to make a point about, what you mentioned about like, oh, like Jake Gittes is doing really well, like he's got like a nice office. But the thing is my impression of him in Chinatown is that he was already doing pretty well as a private investigator. Or
either way, it's not important. Like maybe we could make that part of it.
Well, I feel like the fact that that Gittes is like successful in the original movie is like, I think it's important to his character because like he kind of makes his money off of human misery, but he has these lines that he won't cross, like, and they mention it also in 2 Jakes, like, I won't extort people. It's like, yeah, like I'll ruin marriages and make money off that, but it's like, I'm not going to get people over a barrel for money. And I think that him being like kind of like materially successful from it like says a lot about his character. And it's maybe emblematic of LA, because like certainly LA is a town where people will do all kinds of like repulsive things to be able to have nice suits and stuff like that. And yeah, like I get that it's not you're right, it's like not too interesting that 10 years later, and, Jake's still doing gangbusters, especially, like, in light of the tragedy of Chinatown, because...
Yeah, he really bounced back from that thing where, the woman he loved getting shot in the head in front of him.
God, and then, like, her daughter being taken away by her, like, incestuous rapist
father.
fucking evil father/grandfather. Like,
but hey, it's post-war boom. We're gonna have some insufferable children off of this.
No, Tim, it's Chinatown.
Oh, okay.
But no, but like what I'm getting at is that like he's a successful detective, but he's also kind of I don't want to say, well, he's a private dick, but he's also kind of a dick. No, but like not even so much of that. Like he is a man who has compassion, but Gittes is an interesting character because he does, he's in it for the money, but he also has like some compassion. Like, he obviously gets very involved in the Mulray case because, and he's drawn to Evelyn for a lot of the right reasons, but there's also that thing about him, and I guess this is his tragic flaw, the guy you can't leave well enough alone. Mm-hmm. Like, he sets these incredibly tragic events into motion just by like being the guy who's like, no, I have to know what's going on. Like, I have to know. And it's almost not even like, not that he doesn't have like this strong morality, which is like, oh no, I can't let these rich people get away from it. But you kind of feel like even if he didn't have that drive to kind of expose like what these rich assholes are doing, it's like, no, he just has to know. And he's a guy who can't stop asking questions, and he often asks questions at like really awkward moments. Like he presses, and he's not afraid to press people. Like he's kind of a little, he's got like a kind of Teflon skin. This isn't a guy who gets necessarily like that embarrassed from people pushing back on him, which makes him a good private eye, but also makes him like a little bit likely to, kind of fly headlong into disaster and not even see it coming. And he does have like these big blind spots where he doesn't put like two and two together and realize like what the fuck is going on. I don't get that out of like the two Jakes. Like, and
yeah, he's kind of written as like a Boy Scout and about as interesting.
Yeah, like he's very, it's like, oh no, he's like an upright and moral guy. Plus like the whole like, kind of thematic and political tone of the movie is just so jarring coming after the movie that preceded it, where it's like, oh, well, no, actually like this real estate developer is like just this insanely tragic figure and he just wanted his young wife to be taken care of. And it's like, is this the same fucking universe as Chinatown? It just doesn't ring true.
Yeah, to give it credit, that's not an ending I would have guessed.
Yeah. And there was another point. Oh, well, and the other thing that's really important to bring up is that this is like late Nicholson, like just post Batman Nicholson. And not to take anything away from his performance in Batman, which is a highlight of the film. And it's a fucking comic book movie. It's like, go nuts. Fuck it. Like, be the Joker. But when I started this film, I was like, this really feels like the caricature of Jack Nicholson that like every shitty stand-up did an impression of. And it's very mean of me to say, but he looks like dog shit. And okay, fine. Like, it's 10 years later, and I know that there was a deliberate effort to kind of be like, oh, well, this is a man who's kind of like calcified into his role as like a successful private detective. So, he's a little softer.
I thought you were talking about Jack Nicholson.
Well, hey, 6 of 1, right?
Right.
So you get this like kind of like wealthy, like Trump-bodied guy who is also like an insane, like badass who gets the better of a man half his age and makes him suck on a gun barrel in front of like 25 people.
Yeah, the sort of fanfic thread throughout this movie.
Yeah, and it's a big part of Chinatown that Gittes gets his shit rocked on a regular basis. I mean, like this weird little dwarf like gets the better of him.
Nose,
yeah. And it's like this giant symbol to his like his kind of like obliviousness, that he's gonna wear in his fucking face for like half the movie. It's like, this is not, I mean, he's smart, but he's not smart.
Yeah, and that's the point that I'm making, is that in the first movie, he is a flawed character and he's interesting, but you like the character. But the sequel, as we've seen in other sequels and in fanfic, is that they're conflating the audience's love for the character with like the world's love for the character.
That's a really good way of putting it.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you all love Jake Gittes, so he's just gonna, come through and be this, suave, cool, successful guy, and he's just gonna kind of, steamroll over everyone. It's, it's Daisy Ridley in the Star Wars prequels. It's like, oh, I'm basically perfect. I don't need to learn anything. I'm the best private detective that LA's ever seen.
Yeah, like, I beat the asses of guys half my age. I get pussy half my age. Like,
yeah. And speaking of, because I mentioned fanfic earlier.
I should, I'm sorry to cut you off, Tim, but I should make the caveat. Like, that is extremely true of Jack Nicholson IRL. The women he was with got younger and younger as he got older. And I actually didn't know this, because I do remember him when he was dating Laura Flynn Boyle, who was about, close to 30 years younger than he was. Did you know that he dated Paz de la Huerta?
Wow.
Right. And I think he was pushing 70 at the time.
I don't know what to say to that.
Like, actually,
I mean, if I was 70, I'd try to date Paz de la Huerta as well. I don't know.
Well, you do like disastrous women, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'd sleep with a knife under my pillow. But...
She seems fun. I hope she's doing okay. But yeah, like, so interesting factoid for
great performance in Enter the Void, I gotta say.
Jack Nicholson was born April 22nd, 1937. Paz de la Huerta was born September 3rd, 1984.
How many generations is that?
A lot. And the Jack Nicholson, like, part of his icon status is that he is a pussy-getting maniac. He's up there with guys like Ric Flair for, like, is it possible for a guy to get too much pussy? Like, maybe. But, yeah, it in spite of that, it still just it leaves a bad taste in your mouth in the two Jakes. Like, I don't know why we needed an insert shot of him grabbing Madeline Stowe's ass under her panties. Like, I was like, okay, like, and I'm not opposed to sex scenes in movies.
Because Madeline Stowe isn't going to say no.
Right, yeah, that's the thing. Like, it just seems there's just something fucked about it. And I need to be clear, like, I'm not opposed to, like, even really explicit sex scenes in movies. We talked about Antichrist, which we both loved, which has, like, full penetrative sex. So it's like, it's not like we have a problem with the sex shit. It's just that in this case, it's like...
when it's done so dispassionately and clumsily.
It's so gross. It's just like, why, dude?
It has, like, I don't know. It's like, Daddy can't fuck today. Why don't you two just, like, make out and I'll watch?
It does have that feel in that scene, because, like, there's the part where, like, he's like, oh, okay, like, get on your knees, stick your ass in the air, and don't do anything until I tell you. And it really does feel like, because, like, he is through this entire movie, Jack Nicholson is kind of, like, slack-jawed and sweating, because he's not he was born in 1937. He's not a young guy anymore. And it really does have that feel of, like, like, ooh, do you want me to get on top? And he's like, no, just you, just like, play with yourself or something. And
right, yeah.
Okay.
Let me, give me that cup of water. Daddy needs his pills.
Yeah.
Yeah, that almost felt like an outtake. It felt so genuine.
Mr. Nicholson, do we need to take a break? Nah,
yeah.
I'm good.
I'm a star. I'm a star. I'm a star. I'm a star.
Fortunately, Madeline Stowe went on to better things. 12 Monkeys and all that. But
Good for her.
yeah. Yeah, so...
And also, I gotta add, too, Madeline Stowe being, game for so much of this movie, the only one doing a period-accurate accent as well.
You're right.
She's the only one talking like it's the fucking 40s.
Yeah, and I do feel like there's something like a little bit gawky and cartoonish about her performance, which I can't even necessarily blame her for, because I can't imagine like how weird it must have been on the set. And this was a troubled production. And apparently Nicholson worked very earnestly at it, because like he does have, for obvious reasons, has an affection for this material, like what they now call intellectual property. I guess they were hoping to make a franchise of sorts.
The Chinatown verse.
Yeah, at least they didn't make it a quote-unquote quadrilogy.
Oh, yeah, that reminds me. We need to push the Two Jakes NFT.
Oh, God.
Chinatown coin.
Fucking kill me. Right. So, as like all like big budget Hollywood productions are like a crass cash grab to some degree, I do feel like he went into this with some like, good faith, like earnestness. He wanted it to be period accurate. He took that very seriously. I still feel like there's a certain amount of ego that is inevitably going to get in the way, because it's fucking Jack Nicholson, and he's been an icon for like a couple of decades at this point.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I'm going to do whatever and you're going to love it.
Yeah.
I'm JJ Giddies again.
Yeah, and well, he is it's very weird to compare the Nicholson of the Two Jakes to the Nicholson of Chinatown, or the Nicholson of Five Easy Pieces, or choose any of the thoughtful films that he made in the 70s. Even like the Nicholson of a decade before, The Shining, which is a very, I don't want to say like an over-the-top performance, because it's not that. It's it's a performance which is so unsettling, and it could have been truly cartoonish, but it works really well. But I feel like in the Two Jakes, he's just kind of being like, hey, I'm Jack Nicholson,
Yeah, there's a sort of, like I said, the sort of unearned swagger about just the character and the proceedings.
Yeah, which...
it's just a turnoff. It's just like, I'm not here to watch you be, like, self-satisfied.
Yeah, like, great, a movie about the coolest fucking guy. Like...
Yeah, played by Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, it's like...
I cast myself.
Yeah, it's like nobody... Like, okay, like... And the thing is, like, I understand, like, what fan fiction provides. It is often, like, wish fulfillment.
Escapist fantasy.
Yeah, it's wish fulfillment for the writer. It's, you're working out your headcanon, blah, blah, blah. And, like, maybe... I don't think there's anything like necessarily wrong with thinking like, gosh, like I really hope that, at least Catherine Mulray was able to live an okay life. But do we want to put it on screen?
Yeah, it's that, was it Kaprinski's Triangle? It's that thing that I mentioned in Misunderstanding Comics, available for sale at misunderstandingcomics.com, about filling in more increasingly minor details on a story without actually expanding any of it. We're still treading in the same waters as established in the initial Chinatown.
Right.
It's like, hey, Catherine Mulray, you remember her, right? Hey, the Chinese butler, played by James Hong. You like him, right? Yeah. It's like, we're just gonna play the hits of Chinatown, and we're gonna lay this incredibly obtuse story over it as an excuse to interact with these characters again.
Briefly touching on James Hong, I did find it funny, and I understand that Jake will naturally know a little bit of Mandarin from his time in Chinatown.
Sure.
Because he was a detective there, but it did make me wonder, because he and Khan, James Hong's character, seemed to be particularly warm to each other, but I was thinking as I was watching their scene, like, does Giddy still tell that Chinaman joke? Or did he leave? Did he retire that from the repertoire once he became like really friendly with Khan? Like, did Khan like take him aside and be like, "Hey, like, I know it's funny, maybe a little inappropriate, and real talk, it makes me feel a little weird."
It became the subject of the joke became a Japanese man because it was 1948. Who was going to call him out on that?
And then that's right.
They're
and then
all in camps.
And then Khan was like, "Wait a minute, I gotta get. I'm gonna get back to fucking my wife real quick, but then I'll be back. Just give me like a few minutes.
Just give me like 2 or 3 hours."
I'm sorry, I'm just thinking of that scene, but which is like, I don't know, it just all feels very rote, and I think
yeah, it's just like, hey, yeah, you like this thing again, huh? It's it's Chinatown: The Force Awakens.
Yeah, and as
episode 7,
I think it's and people have correctly decried the tendency of Hollywood today to just kind of hit the same plot points and notes with mostly like the kind of thing that nerds love, like as you mentioned, Force Awakens, which is like like, hey, whatever, we'll go back to Tatooine,
there's all that same shit that you like.
We'll blow
here's
up the Death
a letter
Star
from
again.
Evelyn Mulwray. Yeah, here's James Hong again.
Oh my god, that
here's a
letter,
dodgy real estate
that fucking
deal.
Okay. The parts.
Yeah,
I will actually download a copy of this movie just to pull this bit because I laughed so fucking hard. There is a part where Jake Giddes, the one Jake, the main Jake, reads a letter that he had saved from Evelyn Mulwray, Faye Dunaway's character from Chinatown. And Faye Dunaway came back, not on screen, smart woman. She was like, I'll do Supergirl, but I won't fucking do this shit.
Yeah, I mean, I have standards.
Yeah. She did come back to do a voiceover. She read this letter. And there's a coda in the letter after she signs off, but she adds a PS, and she says, "Catherine said you seemed like a very nice man." And Curly concurred. Ha ha.
Yep.
It's like just Faye Dunaway reading ha ha. It's like, yeah, that's kind of how I feel about this movie, to tell you the truth.
I'm just trying to imagine the scene of like when Evelyn Mulwray has some downtime to chill with like her inbred daughter and the guy who beats his wife, to be like, "Hey, what do you guys think of the Jake Giddes? He's an all right guy, huh?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, I think he's a stand-up fella. Yes, I met him briefly over an afternoon, the day that my mom died. He seemed nice."
I mean, he did slap her around a little, but hey, Curly did that too.
Yeah, see, it was in the zeitgeist. Everyone was doing it. You can't call a guy out for hitting a woman in the 30s.
That's true. Like in the 30s, like that was a real mania, was punching women in the face.
It was a huge fad. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember reading old Gasoline Alleys that was what the story was about.
That's why people loved Andy Capp, because you just know that he was going to punch that bitch Flo in the face.
Yeah. I mean, they took out the parts of Blondie where Dag would hit Blondie with a shoe.
Just like
but those, yeah.
Backhand her with one of those giant sandwiches.
Yeah.
Hitting women. It's funny.
Yeah. It's just like that episode of IT Crowd. So to again invoke Star Wars, somehow Catherine Mulwray has returned.
Well, yeah, she's her father who brought water.
There wasn't
her father who brought water to Los Angeles. There was
water from her other father. Yeah,
right, and I believe his name was Sheev Palpatine. That was John Huston playing Emperor Palpatine in the original Chinatown.
Yeah, and I don't want to spoil it, but the third Chinatown movie, she's gonna be like, "Hey, what's your name?" She's like, "My name's Catherine Skywalker."
So it's just like Yoda said. It's just like Baby Yoda said. There is another Mulray. And speaking of Mulrays, there's a part early on in the movie when I guess Gittes is heading to the housing development, which will figure into the plot, and he turns onto Mulray Drive, which begs the question: does this mean that in this Los Angeles there's no such thing as Mulholland Drive?
I think you stumped the panel.
Yeah, because like Hollis Mulray.
So is this like a WandaVision multiverse thing then?
God, it's like a
This is the variant, Jay Gittes.
Jeez, is there a universe where he's like in like reasonably good shape where he can like beat up David Keith and shove a gun barrel in his mouth and make him piss himself?
Yeah, there is possibly a world where he can do that and maybe even bother to fuck Madeline Stowe.
Instead of just like jerking off onto her girdle.
Right. So yeah, there isn't a beloved or pivotal character from the first movie that the second one won't just like trot out to be like, huh? It's all tied together. It's all that shit that you pigs like.
I mean, I get
wallow in,
and it is like okay, like Robert Towne did write this, so he deserves quite a bit of the blame.
Oh yeah, he deserves most, if not all.
But just like it, and I will say this:
he deserves blame just for writing lines like, "How about that? 2 Jakes."
It's right at the beginning of the fucking movie.
Like, let's just get this out of the way, so the audience isn't confused.
It would be like if at the while Luke was on Tatooine, he turned to the camera and said, "I'm just so sick of all these Star Wars."
Right? Yeah, it's like the Empire has struck back.
Holy shit, there's a Jedi in here. This implies that there has been some kind of a return of the Jedi. And I will say this.
Another choice line. You might think you know what's going on around here, but you don't. Oh.
Damn, so true, bro.
Yeah, I didn't know that you can just come out and say it.
Or
But I'm not the screenwriter of Chinatown.
Or a line that they gave to Madeline Stowe, which is, "I always knew that kitty was a perverted little snat." And it's like, a perverted little what? Like, did you mean snatch?
Maybe she's doing her 40s accent.
Maybe in the 40s, because it was a slightly more polite time. Like, you couldn't say the whole word snatch. You had to.
Oh, it's from a more sophisticated time.
Yeah. Like an elegant weapon. A woman's snatch.
A woman's period.
A woman's girdle.
Yeah.
A woman's stocking shown in exhaustive detail to the point where you wonder, like, is this like a thing that Nicholson has?
I don't. Well, I mean, at the time, Marlena Dietrich and Rita Hayworth, they're calling everyone a snat. So
I'm
in all their movies.
I am sure that Betty Davis and Joan Crawford called each other that.
I believe it.
But yeah, like I was gonna say about Robert Towne, like, he does. We'll put the blame on him for a lot of this, but it does kind of boggle the mind where you're like, how do you go from Chinatown to this? And then again, like, just kind of like lazily repeating a lot of the same elements of the earlier film. I do wonder, like, what kind of permutations the screenplay did go through because of the troubled production of the movie. And, like, maybe I can, talk about that a little bit. Because this initially was supposed to happen as early as 1976 because Robert Evans had the rights to a Chinatown sequel. Because, hey, fuck it. Why not, right?
Right. Yeah.
But that ended up not happening. And then they tried again, I want to say in like somewhere between 1983 to 1986. I forget. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they made Blade Runner and they're like, hey, people like these future noir movies.
Right. And I believe that in the early 80s, Robert Towne Jack Nicholson and Robert Evans came together. They formed a production company between the three of them, and they're like, okay, we'll get no money up front. We'll just take any profits just to get this made, right? And initially, Robert Towne was chomping at the bit to direct. He had taken a little bit of an L with Personal Best in 1982, which I think has...
Not his personal best? Yeah.
More like personal worst. But apparently that movie...
Oh, shoot. Why didn't I say that? That's so much funnier.
Right. I know.
Fuck.
I'm laughing. But that movie has grown in reputation since. I admit that I missed it when it was on Criterion Channel. I do kind of want to hunt it down. But anyway, so, he was smarting a little from Personal Best. Maybe he wanted a W, so, he's like, hey, like, we'll do the Chinatown sequel, and I will direct it. The fly in the ointment, though, was Robert Evans, because, for whatever reason, and a lot of this is laid out in a book which I've recommended on the podcast before, Peter Biskin's Easy Riders, Raging Bulls. And I believe in that book, he ascribes this decision to booze and cocaine between the three of them, because they said, hey, why don't we get Evans to play the other Jake? It didn't occur to them that Evans had admitted himself he was a terrible actor. Terrible actor. The way that he broke into the business was that he was spotted by Norma Shearer, the very great MGM actress of the 30s, and she was like, hey, this kid's really good looking, like, let's put him on screen. But acting talent didn't really go along with that. And the way they smoothed this over was, I believe Robert Towne was like, okay, like, I'll work with him for 3 weeks before we start shooting. And hey, like, Towne, and it has to be said, Towne was like on board. He was like, no, fuck it, like, we'll put Bob in there. I'll work with him.
The kid stays in the picture. Exactly.
It'll be good. It'll be great. Like, I can do this. And then after 3 weeks of working with me, he's like, I can't do it. It's fucking terrible. Like, he's awful. Like, we can't make this fucking movie with him in it. And he tried to spare Evans's feelings. Like, he didn't, I think one of the suggestions was, like, let's, just shoot a little bit with him and then, like, fire him. Like, like, in the kind of, like, weasel dick way that these things work a lot of the time in Hollywood. Nobody is just frank and open and says, like, you're fucking fired. So Towne didn't want to tell Evans, like, you suck. We can't have you on this picture. And Nicholson was pissed off because I think it came down to, like, if you bounce him out, like, I walk, like, I don't, I'm not going to do it for our original deal. And Towne was like, fine, fuck all y'all. And I forgot to mention, like, one of the last straws with Evans was that, I think in anticipation of him appearing on screen once again, he had gone to see Alain Delon's plastic surgeon and was like, give me the works, and came back, like, just looking fucked up. And he didn't want to get a period haircut for the film. And when he did finally get a period-accurate haircut, it was like, oh shit, he has got scars from cosmetic surgery that will show on camera.
That's what happens when you cast Robert Evans.
Right. So that second attempt at the two Jakes did not come off. And there were, it's all, like, and I won't bore all of you with the details. You can get it in Easy Riders, Raging Bulls. You could probably get Evans' side of it in his memoir. I'll link a couple of interviews with Nicholson and Towne. But Towne was out as director. And when this eventually did get made...
Sure, he was relieved.
Yeah. Nicholson was like, fuck it, I'll direct it myself. And that is what led us to the two Jakes that you can now view on HBO Max streaming, but don't.
Yeah. Why would you?
Who knows if they had let Towne direct, if they hadn't made this weird decision to be like, we'll put Bob in it. Like, what could go wrong? And derail that attempt at production. Who knows? Maybe it would have been okay. Because, Towne has directed and he's done all right with it. There are people like Personal Best. Like, he did one of the two Steve Prefontaine movies that came out in 1998. That was, I believe he did Without Limits, which is well regarded. So I don't know how Two Jakes would have come out if he'd helmed it. I don't know if he would have reined in Nicholson a little bit, but how can you rein in Jack Nicholson? He's funding it. He's starring in it. He's going to be a shot caller on it. So who knows? Maybe it was doomed from the start.
Yeah, and you got to admire their tenacity that like this picture will get made no matter how many millions of dollars it costs us.
Right.
Because there's a point too where you're like, why do you not just walk away from this debacle? Just you think you're leaving money on the table, you're taking a chance? I don't know. There have been enough opportunities for them to try to make something of it, and each one ends up worse than when they started until they finally released the movie, and we got what we got, and it's terrible.
I don't know if it was like, I mean, it's tempting to say sunk cost fallacy, but maybe it's just like, the idea of this Los Angeles trilogy is like a tantalizing one.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, like, it's pretty rare that a sequel can outdo the original, but it can be done. I mean, Godfather 2. But this is not Godfather 2. It's not even I don't know. Is it more like Godfather 3? I've never seen Godfather 3.
Well, I think that you made the point that not only is it a poor follow-up to Chinatown, but it is just a poor noir film in general. And I think that's really the thing that I want to latch onto, because not only does it like tread in so many familiar tropes from the original, like it doesn't bring anything new to it. It follows more or less the same beats of the original. It has, the same story of, infidelity. It has business partners, at odds with each other. It has, Giddy's being injured at a certain point in the movie. It all, and again, like the Mulray connection again, it all feels like we're just repeating the same movie. It isn't expanding on anything. It's just giving us a distilled version of what we liked about the first one.
Yeah, and it kind of gives you a bad feeling right off the bat when you and I feel like Towne was trying to do like a little twist on how the original film opened. The first shot of the original Chinatown is a shot of a black and white photo of a man and a woman like engaged in an affair, and then you see like the husband's reaction to it, and then it's like, okay, like pull out, and then we get the broader picture.
Curly, you can't eat the curtains.
You pull out and you get like a broader picture, like, okay, this is what who are these characters? Oh, this is a private eye, like this is what he does. He like breaks up marriages for a living. He follows people who are cheating on their spouses, blah, blah, blah. And then we go from there. And then in the Two Jakes, you get like a...
First off, you get a minute of looking at a shoe.
Well, before that, you get kind of a out of focus image that you realize is, again, a couple in a passionate embrace.
More infidelity, yeah.
And it's like, okay. And then, there's like I forget how they do the effect, but there's like a pull out or a dissolve or something where it's like, okay. And then there's the camera focused on the couple. Okay, this is calling back. Did you remember Chinatown? Yes, I remember Chinatown. I remember what fucking happened in Chinatown. I just watched it. And then Towne tries to do a little twist on it where it isn't just a simple case of a man finding out that his wife has been unfaithful. He already knows she's been unfaithful, and they're going to pull some kind of a sting. And you hear Harvey Keitel's voice saying, "Oh no, Kitty, how could you? With him?" And it's, at first you're like, wow.
Yeah, they wrestled another dynamite performance out of Harvey Keitel.
It's funny because at first you're like, wow, Harvey Keitel is terrible in this. But then you realize like he's just like saying bad dialogue that he's been fed.
Yeah.
But yeah, then there's the shoes. And it's like, what the...
I feel like it's a joke on the audience.
And those shoes are in the shot for a long-ass time.
3 times longer than they need to be, yes.
And then you see later in the scene, hey, the two Jakes are wearing the same kind of shoes, which is like, why does it matter? I don't know.
And by the end of the movie, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't. And then it's like, okay, like you think the two Jakes, okay, both these guys are named Jake. They're wearing the same shoes. This character, Berman, Harvey Keitel's character, he's up to something. Like, why is he so weirdly dispassionate about finding his wife fucking another man? Oh my god, he killed the guy. And then this idiotic plot proceeds from there. But what do you get at the end of the movie from the mirroring of the two Jakes? Like, what is the point of that imagery?
I'm tired just thinking about it.
Because
the lighter with the letter R on it.
Well, and that was another thing which bothered me, because we see it under the desk where it's spilled out of Lillian, Madeline Stowe's purse, but when did we see Giddys looking at that lighter? Because he mentions it later. He's like, oh yeah, the R on Lillian's lighter. And it's like, what? When did he look at it? It was like lying on the floor.
It's such a bad script.
Like, is this some Sherlock Holmes shit where he's like, oh, Watson, you see, but you do not observe. And, I see from the splashes of clay on your pants cuff that you took a walk down in Southwark or whatever. Like, is it that? Because we didn't fucking see it in the movie.
I don't know.
I'm sorry, Tim. I don't mean to upset you.
No, it's like, I don't have anything to add to that other because trying to follow it, I'm like, I know it is folly to try to make sense of this plot, so I just gave up.
Yeah, because
ultimately, like, the plot isn't important because the plot is in service of reconnecting characters from the first movie.
Right.
Like, not only do we get, and I know I keep bringing up Star Wars because, when you think Star Wars, you think fan service, but it's the same two assistants too working for Jake now as before. So you're like, hey, it's Greedo. He showed up again.
It's not the same actors though, because one of them is Bruce Glover in the original, right. But I don't think he came back. Did he?
Yeah, maybe he took a look at the script and was like, no, I'm gonna go do Supergirl.
I'd rather appear in one of my son's weird ass movies than this.
Right, but yeah, so he's got his two assistants still, and they've had zero character development in the first one, but they're still around like beloved characters, and one of them in particular is there to again more of Towne's bang up writing. One of them gets the line, Jake, you're not responsible for Evelyn Mulray's death, and you're not responsible for Catherine Mulray's life.
Oh, thanks. That makes me feel so much better.
Yeah, he busts in like the guy who replaced the psychologist from The Room to like harangue Jake and like provide plot exposition.
Oh, like when and of course you're referring to one of the many famous bits in The Room where and they don't it's not clear that they did this, but they switched actors partway through production.
Right.
So the guy haranguing him
digression.
is supposed to be the first guy, but it's not. It's like you're like, who is this? Like speaking to Johnny like they're obviously intimates, and you don't find out until you talk to people who are fans in The Room that it's because they recast like partway through.
Yeah, so he's just this character is there to provide exposition. And you're like, okay, like
was that
why couldn't this
Eli Wallach's character?
No, Eli Wallach was like that lawyer type, and I was glad to see Eli Wallach because of how great he is in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and everything else.
Well, he's awesome, but it's kind of a waste of Eli Wallach in this picture. I wasn't even clear.
Oh, it's absolutely a waste of Eli Wallach.
And I may have taken a different approach than you did watching this movie, because as you said, your brain turned to mush and you kind of tuned out, which I can't really blame you for, because like trying to pay attention to this was a struggle. But I really, because I want to provide you, the listener, with the best experience possible, I tried very earnestly to follow this movie and follow the plot and be like, okay, well, what is the story? And I feel like I sort of get like the broad strokes of the story, but it's not a very good story. And there's a lot of information which was not like properly conveyed. I don't know what Eli Wallach's character is like. They bring back Escobar, a policeman from the first movie, who's,
Yeah.
now a police captain, and what does he do? Nothing. It's like, oh, he's a police captain that knows Gittes.
He is Escobar.
Yeah. It's like, okay.
Yeah, it's because there's so many scenes that only exist to remind you of characters from the first movie that you're watching them and like, what's going on? Like, what am I supposed to get out of the scene? What do the characters want out of this scene? And a lot of the time you're like, I don't know. Like, it's just, this is a chance to see Escobar again and be reminded who Escobar is.
Well, if it's a male character, they're gonna, like, grudgingly admire Gittes. And if it's a female character,
Right.
she's gonna want to fuck him.
Yeah, I mean, as everything's right in the world.
Right, and of course...
It's just like, the protagonist in SFW.
Right, and then, of course, by the end of the movie, Catherine Mulray is trying to seduce him in his office, which, thank God, he, pulls away from her. He's like, oh, this isn't right. But it's like, why? Like, fucking why?
I don't even know, because she's met one man, apparently.
Because, well, I guess she goes for, like, older guys, because she was married to Harvey Keitel, and she's like, oh, whatever, I might as well fuck another old dude.
Sure, yeah. Well, you know where she gets that.
And, let's compare and contrast, like, the main female character of Chinatown with the female characters in The Two Jakes, because, Evelyn Mulray, is played by Faye Dunaway. Incredible performance from Faye Dunaway. I understand that Ms. Dunaway is a very difficult person in real life. But she's very good in this, and she did throw a cup of piss in Polanski's face on the set. So I'm gonna go Team Faye on this one.
Yeah, 1 point for her.
Yeah. She's really good in it, and the character of Evelyn Mulray, again, is like one of the great, like, noir femme fatales, because she's so seductive but so tragic, and she feels like a person with a story. Like, she's, I was just thinking, after watching Chinatown, like, I was thinking about her promiscuity in the movie. Like, I have affairs, I don't tell my husband, every time I go to bed with a guy. But, she has that feel of a woman who's been profoundly hurt by trauma, and, she's promiscuous because she's fucking raped by her father when she was 15, Like,
yeah, that'll mess you up.
It's not like, oh, look at this slut. It's like, oh my God, like, this woman has an incredibly, like, sad past. And you don't sit there in judgment of her. You're like, she's very, and, especially, like, it's played by Faye Dunaway, at first she's very, like, controlled, very cold, very suspicious of Gittes, naturally. Why wouldn't she be? But when you see her later in the movie where she's, like, kind of reaching out to him and, like, starting to trust him, and, it hurts you as much as it hurts her when he's brusque with her, and, like, just seeing the relationship between these two characters is, like, this push and pull is, like, really captivating. Meg Tilly, who we barely mentioned, and I'm a very big fan of Meg Tilly, but this is a pretty thankless role for her.
They are quite a pair.
First of all, she's like...
Her and her sister.
She's very good in Psycho, too. But from the beginning, you don't even get, like, glimpses of Catherine Mulray, Meg Tilly. Like, she's very covered up. Like, when you first see her, she's, when she...
It's such and such. It's like, oh, we haven't been introduced. It's like, yeah, that's deliberate.
Yeah, like, she, when you first see her, she's in full, like, kind of like, 40s getup, sunglasses, big ol' hat. You can't see much of her face. You see her again at, what I think is, I want to say that's the Max Factor building on Highland. I'm in Hollywood. I might be wrong, but, she's at the spa, and she's wearing a...
Oh, that's Bullock's Wilshire. What a great waste of a great location.
Okay, yeah, no, thank you for correcting me so I didn't have to go back in the show notes and say, Jen was wrong when she said that it was the Max Factor building. It's actually Bullock's Wilshire.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tim. when you see her again, she's like in a mud mask. And it's like, why are they concealing Meg Tilly so much? And that's when you're like, and I'd figured it out before then. I was like, okay, well, she's Catherine Mulray, and I don't know, I guess like her appearance would have been too easy to put two and two together. Because I will say that in a later scene where she's just very plainly dressed for gardening, again under a big old hat, and Giddys comes to show her some evidence which proves that he knows that her husband definitely meant to murder that guy, and it was premeditated. When you catch a glimpse of her face, there's this striking resemblance to Faye Dunaway. It's weird. I mean, they're not related, but it's good casting because it's like, oh my God, like she could be Evelyn Mulray's daughter. So maybe that was the decision to kind of like keep her covered up, but it feels weird. Like everything in this movie just feels like cartoonish and weird and wrong.
Yeah, and I didn't catch on to her being Catherine Mulray because I refuse to accept the confluence of coincidences that would lead to that conclusion.
Well, it's LA, it's a small town. Everybody knows everybody.
Yeah, I guess so. The daughter of the wife of the water magnate, of course, is involved in the real estate scam undermined by the oil man that we meet 2/3 of the way through the movie.
Yeah, and it's to compare it to the way that the story of Los Angeles and its essentially stolen water is told, it's so like mysterious and elegant, and then like as the pieces fall into place, you're like, oh my God. And then it like
just that there can't be like two different groups of corrupt people in LA.
And I feel like this is something which which Towne attempted and couldn't pull off, and that James Ellroy has done like very well, is kind of having a Jesus Christ, I hate to say a Los Angeles like expanded universe, but we have to use it like
Look,
those
we're
terms.
Well past that point, yeah.
Because in James Ellroy's novels, he does have recurring characters, that pop up from book to book. He uses like real people as characters in his novels, and he pulls it off. I mean, I'll leave it to avid book readers to explain why he did it where Towne couldn't. I mean, we're talking about extremely different mediums here.
I mean, Towne only had like 7 or 8 years to fix the script. So,
well, I think that he spent a lot of that time being embroiled in a bitter custody battle with his wife at the time, and then frolicking with athletic young women in preparation for personal best. Again, it's all in Easy Riders, Raging Bulls.
And the first part was preparation for Giddys versus Giddys.
Right. And I think, which brings to mind like another tidbit, which I just remembered about the making of the two Jakes. Another problem that they had when they initially tried to go into production, like I think it was on their second try, was that only 80% of the screenplay was written. And Towne was like, I am going on vacation, but I'm going to finish that other 20%. Well, guess what happened?
Yeah, I've told that lie before.
Right. It did not happen. So I don't know if other people had to come in and like kind of patch it together. Like, who knows who else, like maybe, I think Nicholson actually took a crack at it himself. Because there are stories about him, like, working all day in the set and then going home and then spending like a few more hours, like trying to get the script to hang together. So I don't think he was sleeping much either.
Yeah, that is crash coding, and more often than not, that does not work.
Right. It's like, it is not a way to complete a project in a satisfactory way. So, you end up...
It's a rush job.
Yeah, you end up seeing the seams. So... maybe that explains the two Jakes. It just wasn't meant to be.
And yet they did it anyway.
Yeah. And Paramount, I think Paramount ended up releasing it and taking a bath on it because it did not recoup its cost. some people apparently liked it at the time. Among them, Roger Ebert. I mean, he's been wrong before, so...
Yeah. There are interesting ideas in it, poorly portrayed. I mean...
Right.
The things that I like about it are, they do mention the line, the big thief stealing from the little thief.
Right.
And I like that there are different, there are different crime spheres. There are different like orders of magnitude to crime that intersect in these movies, and that I think is interesting. You have like these crimes of passion. You have small crimes. You have like this low petty kind of crime. Then you have like this methodical, calculating sort of high crime going on, and the two tend to be interwoven. And Giddys as a private investigator is usually investigating the former, uncovering the latter.
Right.
That intersection I find interesting. It's too bad that this movie sucks.
Yeah, and it's that feeling of like turning over the rock and seeing the big and little bugs that scurry out.
Right, yeah. Or, finding an ear on someone's lawn.
Right.
Seeing where that thread takes you.
Oh, God. Right. It's, yeah. And it works in Chinatown, like, in this, not so much. And I think the oil and gas thing, like, it could have been interesting. But again, like, and I keep hammering on the word cartoonish, but it's so dumb and unsubtle.
Do we need to have another Chinatown movie centered around, like, your resource, like, city services, basically?
Right. And then the way, like, I feel like the recurring
third one's going to be about a railroad. I don't know.
The recurring earthquakes in the movie are kind of telling because it's like it's really unsubtle, like interrupting a scene with an earthquake.
as subtle as an earthquake.
Yeah,
yes.
or like there's yet another laughable scene where Giddys goes out to the housing development, which apparently is just venting fucking gas all over the place, and
yeah, they have, what's his name, that beady-eyed character actor in that small role.
And it doesn't help that, like, a couple of actors in this look really similar to each other.
Okay.
Like, I was like, wait, is that one guy or is that Ruben Blades, who I didn't even recognize at first? And I was like, who's that actor playing the gang? But I'll get to him. Like I was going to say, there's the bit at the housing development where Giddys lights a cigarette and gets blown up.
Yeah, right in front of a sign that says "Do not enter."
And I'm like, why the fuck isn't he dead or like covered with third-degree burns? Like, what am I missing? Is that a thing that can happen? That it's like oh God, I don't remember where I'm getting this reference, but I remember maybe it was a friend of mine who said that in like certain bad action movies, like the purpose of explosions is not to like kill people or maim them, but to merely move them around. So it's like, an explosion happens and it just kind of like blows the protagonist like into the air like 30 or 50 feet and but he's fine. Like same thing here. Like he was sitting on like some kind of natural gas vent, which he ignited.
And then it moved him around.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, Harvey Keitel's character does at the end of the movie. And he is apparently...
Speaking of dumb action tropes...
Yeah, and he is apparently, like, so completely obliterated that the cops are like, so what's there to investigate? Like, if everything burned up, who cares? Case closed.
Yeah, your slow burn, no pun intended, neo-noir thriller ends with a house exploding.
Right.
Sure,
and then,
why not?
And then, like, his, and I'm going to go back to the Ruben Blades character. That guy comes across, that character, he shows up in Giddys' office, and, kind of, like, he has this big friend, like, rough Jake up a little. And you're like, oh, wow.
I don't know who the hell that guy is.
Well, yeah, because you're, like, at first, like, oh, this guy's obviously, like, some, like, important gangster. Like, I don't know why he's coming out with his thugs to do this, like, dirty work, but okay. Like he seems like a Dutch Schultz type, but no, he's apparently like some kind of a lackey to Berman, Harvey Keitel's character? Because he's lurking around the housing development near the end. It's like, what? Like, who is this person? Is he like a 2-bit thug, or is he like a shot caller?
The movie never explains it. This is yet another thing that could have just been cut the fuck out of this movie.
It's a very dumb movie. It's
like a third of it. Like, you can get like the oil and gas subplot thing. Look, I mean, ultimately it is just like, it is Meg Tilly trying to get the housing development out from under her husband by having him kill his partner.
Right.
I think.
Which I think we're supposed to be like really thrilled about that she is instantly a wealthy woman. That she's basically, wait a minute, and this is why the themes of this movie are so fucked compared to Chinatown. Because in Chinatown you had that bleakness of like Noah Cross, Emperor Palpatine.
Right, yeah.
A man who is so rich that
he doesn't even know how much money he has.
Yeah,
anymore.
and just with one sweep of his arm, forget it. Like, forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown. Like, I not only will I remove this thorn in my side, the daughter that I raped, I will then take our daughter. I will take her completely away, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. Like, just that powerful despair at the end where it's just like, oh, there are forces in this world that we are powerless to contend with.
Yeah, just there are orders of magnitude outside of your reach.
Yeah, and that's what leaves you sitting...
I wish there was some sort of pop culture phrase you could use to sum that up.
And
I don't know.
Forget
it, it's the two Jakes.
And, if you think you know what's going on, you don't.
That is dynamite. Let me write that down. That is natural gas. Let me write that.
Actually, no, I have a better line from the movie, one which was so great that I wrote down. Like when a father bangs his daughter, like dogs and squid.
Oh, like tears and rain, am I right?
I've seen things.
I've seen crazy shit,
like
man.
Dogs fucking.
Like dogs fucking.
But the point...
all those moments will be lost.
Like, the point I'm getting at is that, like, okay, like, that is the thing about Chinatown, which leaves you sitting there devastated on your living room couch at 1 a.m, having finished the film. You're like, fuck, that is so perfectly bleak and so truthful. But in Two Jakes, we're like, okay, so Catherine Mulray gets to be an incredibly wealthy oil and gas heiress.
Isn't she already wealthy? If she's her father's daughter.
Right. And it's like, so she's just going to end up like a Lady Noah Cross?
Okay.
I mean, it's like, so that's the good ending. And then like that noblest of professions, the real estate developer, like sacrifices himself so that his young wife may go forth and continue to exploit resources which should be for the people of Los Angeles. Like, thank God.
Right, yes.
Thank God.
She retains the development's mineral rights. I bet you didn't see that coming, gentle viewer.
Like, thank God that Jake Gittes is so principled that he committed perjury to make this happen. He tampered with evidence.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And committed perjury so that he could make this woman even more wealthy.
Well, at least he won't extort anyone.
And also he made David Keith piss himself.
David Keith, his character could have been written out of this movie.
You don't need that fucking character. Like, no...
Yeah, because we haven't seen him... we are introduced to him, then we don't see him for like an hour.
Yeah, and the way he's set up, you're like, oh, this is going to be an antagonist that figures in the plot. No. Like, he's a dick, and then he gets humiliated.
Yeah. We do not need his character in it. Like, and if you need some kind of connection to the police, like, we already have, his old buddy from before. Like, make him do something.
Yeah, you already have Eli Wallach. And again, no shade to David Keith, not to be confused with Keith David.
Right, yeah. I mean, I get them confused all the time.
Oh, they should have put Rowdy Roddy Piper in this movie.
Or even normal Rowdy Piper. That would have livened things up.
Oh, what the fuck? Hang on one second.
Oh, and also Harvey Keitel's character has cancer. Why is that important?
Bro, it's so sad. I mean, it's so sad, bro.
God, this stupid movie. This
like,
dumb
I feel
story.
like there was supposed to be... Okay, like, if you take the grain of that idea, you could, because I feel like they were trying to imply that, because like he's building this fucking housing development, or trying to, like, on a tract of land which is beset by like poisonous gases from the earth, and I think they're trying to imply that it's making him sick, which, okay, like that could definitely lead to an interesting theme about the way we humans like exploit natural resources like to our own detriment for like material gain. But I don't feel like that's a threat. Like, that's me like
that
writing.
Is way out of place.
That's me writing more fan fiction.
Right, yeah. I mean, hell, at this point, takes all comers.
It's like the people who think like the Star Wars prequels are really good, but it's because they've written all this like fanfic in their head about like, oh, Anakin was doing this and motivated because of this, and blah blah. He and Obi-Wan this, that,
trying
and
to
the other.
retcon the dumb political like maneuvering in the background of it to be like, oh, it's actually it's a commentary on the Iraq War. It's like, no, it's a dumb movie and you're filling in all the gaps.
Well, like maybe it is a commentary on the Iraq War and Bush's America. Well, guess what? It's
for kids.
It's a stupid fucking commentary on those things.
Right.
It's stupid. Like, it is not a good lacerating or skewering of post 9/11 America. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it is. We've undone all the success of the previous trilogy just because we needed to make more movies. Like, that's about the extent of it.
It's like when, like, I've seen like a couple of people online say like, no, actually, like, M. Night Shyamalan is a brilliant director. He absolutely knows what he's doing. Like, everything that's bad in his movies is a deliberate choice.
Well, then he's brilliant for making terrible choices.
Yeah,
like, who else can be wrong that consistently?
I'm like, damn, I want to live on your planet because it seems like a wild place.
Yeah. Not only does so we've already established that there's no reason for Meg Tilly to be Catherine Mulray, but then on top of that, why is it important that she hides that she's Catherine Mulray?
That's a really good question.
I mean, there's the expectation too, like, there is an off chance that only if they go to Jake Gittes in the first place, why would he even remember or recognize her? Like, say, there's someone who you knew when they were a teenager, and then you see them a decade later.
Right.
If you aren't introduced to them, you probably aren't going to recognize them because they've become an adult in that time.
Right, and I guess
it's not necessary on two levels.
Yeah, and then everyone is so wrapped up with like, oh, protect Catherine. Like, I don't know what, like,
she's a conniving adult at this point. She doesn't need protecting.
I mean, I'm not sure, because I guess like, oh, like, we don't want to expose that, who her father actually is, but wouldn't people just assume that it was Hollis Mulray, not Noah Cross?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have like a poster of the genealogy of movers and shakers in LA County.
Yeah, like,
it doesn't matter to me. I couldn't even tell you who our mayor is. Again, it's because the audience is supposed to care about it. But why would any of the characters?
Yeah, I don't get it. It's just it's a big mess. Don't watch this movie. Like, we took we took one from the team and watched it for you. Like, you can...
Yeah, I mean, if you had to watch like one neo-noir movie from the 90s, I would suggest you watch Mad Dog Time. Between the two of these, between the two Jakes and Mad Dog Time, hands down, there's a clear winner here.
Hey, just ask Chapo Trav House's Matt Christman.
Right.
I wonder if he's seen this one.
Oh, I hope for his sake he didn't.
Yeah, for real.
Got Harvey Keitel's awful crying in this.
Oh, God. It is kind of funny. It makes you want to put on Bad Lieutenant instead.
Even a mediocre lieutenant, I would watch that.
The just okay lieutenant.
Unremarkable lieutenant.
Mediocre lieutenant. Oh, it's about a mediocre white man.
To my mind, this is the worst movie that we've watched for this podcast.
Wow. I didn't even talk about the... God, like, the directing is so bad in this, too.
Well, lay it on me.
Well,
Tell me more about what's bad about it.
okay, like with the friend of the show, Darren Hertzeg, I think we've talked about zooms and how much we like zooms and how it's sort of sad that...
Yeah, you don't see them so much anymore.
Yeah, it's not really a directorial tool that you see anymore. Maybe because it calls attention to itself too much, but who knows. There are zooms in this movie, but they kind of make you go
they're
like...
tough to do unobtrusively.
Yeah, and the way they're used in this movie, they kind of make you go like, oh, maybe this is why people don't do zooms anymore. Because this just looks like dog shit. Like, it's...
Like, let's just, yeah.
Okay, like, for example, like, the scene where we first are introduced to David Keith's character, and I can't remember if Giddys comes into the police station to talk to Escobar or if it's Eli Wallach's character. It doesn't matter, but...
Doesn't matter.
That scene is just, like, so... Like, it feels so weird and smushed because there are all these, like, weird, very... I don't want to say, like, extreme close-ups, but, like,
it's
not,
chaotic
like...
and not in a good way. It isn't like you feel like there's a lot going on. You just aren't sure what's going on.
Yeah, and, like, maybe I'm not, like, maybe I'm not smart or artistic enough to, like, talk about why the way these scenes are directed bothered me, but it really stands out in the police station scene, as I mentioned. It really, really gets on your nerves in the fucking courtroom scene at the end, where it isn't just, like, close-up after close-up after close-up. Then there are, like, these push-ins, which just look fucking awful. They are so tacky. As if, like...
Hey, give me the courtroom scene in Eureka instead.
Claude!
Like, 3-page monologue.
Yeah, like, I can't even articulate why, like, but, you know, it's because it feels, like, busy and fussy, and there's no, like, it's like, you know what it's like? It's like somebody jamming on the same note on a piano keyboard over and over and over again. It's like close-up, 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 and it's not like the actors are giving you anything like that fucking interesting.
Yeah, that is a problem, too. If they were close-up, you know, if it was... You know, just a static shot of, you know, Guy Pearce listening to someone say Rollo Tomassi.
Shit, that was the scene which popped into my head. Because I wanted to be like, okay, you know the scene where Dudley Smith
that is how you do it.
Says Rollo Tomassi to Ed Exley. And, like, Guy Pearce in that scene, your boyfriend, Guy Pearce.
He's such an amazing actor.
And a beautiful man.
And lover, I'm sure, yes.
Yes. Delightful man. I don't know how to describe it. The acting, which is so just like, I mean, he's doing a poker face, but you see the wheels turning in his head where he's like, oh, yeah. Fuck. That's good.
It's like, don't react.
Yeah. That's incredible.
You just gave the whole thing away. Don't react.
Yeah. And, you know, in this, it's like you get, and you feel like Nicholson would, like, know better. But I don't know. Like, it's just like all these...
Well, there's nothing in the story to justify that either. I don't even know how the Catherine Mulray secret identity was revealed because I wasn't fucking paying attention.
He figures it out, and this is another clunker in the movie, is when he... I think he asks her to his house, and they're going to talk about... I don't know. It's like, oh, I know your husband, like, meant to kill... like, pre-plan that killing of that guy, and I know why, I guess. But he figures it out when he sees the necklace she's wearing, which is like kind of like a big piece of costume jewelry, and it's it resembles the which I think it resembles what I think was a dyed Matilha poppy in the earlier scene where he was talking to Khan, because I've seen those flowers before, and they're just
that
like
stupid motif.
Yeah, like they're those kinds of flowers which are you know, very common as ornamental plants were in my area. Like they're also called, like, you know, jokingly
Asian, Jen. We don't call them Oriental anymore.
That is not the preferred nomenclature, dude. They're called fried egg plants or flowers because it's just like a yellow and white bud. It's like a yellow center with white petals. But in the movie they dyed them, like, they gave them little lavender edges, and then they say this bullshit, which I don't know if it's true. It's like, oh yeah, like you can change the colors of the plants if you scorch the seeds, which is like, okay, whatever. Something that Robert Towne read about and put in the screenplay. And then Giddys makes the connection when he sees Catherine's necklace, And she starts explaining the significance of the necklace. And he's like, oh, fuck, you're Evelyn's daughter. But this scene is so leaden, and it just drags on. And I'm like, is this supposed to be like a powerful moment? Because it's just like, okay, can you two get on with it? Like, I figured this out an hour ago. You're just playing catch up, dude. And it's not the kind of movie where you're like, oh no, this tragic hero, like, he thinks he has it all figured out, but he didn't make this one connection. It's just like, God, just, okay. We know.
What are the stakes of him knowing or not knowing?
Yeah, like, we still, and,
like,
you know,
what does it change?
We haven't figured out, like, what is so fucking important about, like, why, you know, apparently, like, nobody wanted gays to know where Catherine Mulray was. I don't know why. I don't know why the movie tells us that. I don't know why that was important in the movie.
It is as important that they not be together as it was in, God, I'm mentioning it twice, SFW.
Right, where it's like,
oh, yeah, we can't have these two people get together for reasons that aren't worth going into.
But and the way it's so desultory in that movie, where it's just like, oh, Cliff, like, I don't think you should come over. I don't think it's good for you and Wendy to be together right now. And then, you know, just, oh, wait, they ran into each other somewhere. It's like, oh, wow, these tragic star-crossed lovers.
What does it matter whether Jake Gittes meets the daughter of a client of his?
I mean, you know, like, there is potential there where it's like, you know, because they're connected by this tragic history, they don't use it in this movie to any good effect.
I guess that's true. That's the part I left out.
Yeah, and it's
the part that Towne left out.
Yeah, like, I don't know what he was doing. And it's kind of like how, you know, and then that whole revelation scene just being like, you know, like a damp squib. You know, like earlier in the movie when Gittes first comes, not first, because, like, I guess Berman hired him, but when Gittes goes to the housing development, because he knows, like, something's going on, it's like, ooh, this...
Not what we think it is, although not that it matters.
Yeah, and it's like, ooh, the two Jakes, like, are confronting each other, and you're like, this should be a potent scene. Like, all those scenes with Nicholson and John Huston in Chinatown, there's just this undertone of dread from, like, John Huston's performance, where you're like, wow, like, I don't think this is a good guy. I just have a bad feeling. Like, and the scenes are so laden with foreboding. And in this, it's like, you know, it's like, hey, like, why'd you kill that guy? Like, what was that about? And then he's like, hey, are you accusing me of murder? He's like, yeah. Okay, well, see you later. What? Like, what the fuck? Like a scene in a good movie, a scene where a guy comes to you and says, I know what you did, and I know why you did it. And I got my eye on you. Like, that
Private investigator.
That should be an oh shit moment in the screenplay, where you're like, oh fuck, like, what's going to come of this? But the way they do it, it's like...
What's at stake?
You know, it's like... It feels more like Jack Nicholson going to Harvey Keitel and saying, like, hey man, like, you borrowed my golf clubs a couple of weeks ago, and, like, you haven't given them back yet. Like, what happened? Oh, you'll get those golf clubs back. Okay, dude, see you later. I'm going to go light a cigarette next to this danger keep out sign.
This hasn't been a great analysis of this movie just because I'm so flummoxed by it. All I can just be is, like, it's dumb and it sucks.
Yeah, like, I feel like, and, you know, I understand why you had this reaction and why you kind of tuned out. I tried really hard. And, you know, that, again, that emphasizes the good cop, bad cop dynamic that Tim and I have on this show. Tim is an impatient man. And I'm a nerd. I'm going to be like, well...
You're an impatient woman, or, you know, oil and water.
Well, I'm like, you know what? I said I would do this assignment. I'm going to put the most effort possible into doing my homework. But then you do your homework, and it's watching the two Jakes.
Yeah, and I mean, don't slight me. I gave this movie all my attention. I gave it more attention than it deserved, and still, I cannot be arsed.
Sure, like, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying, like, oh, Tim, like, you just fucking tuned out, didn't you? It's like, no, I understand why you had the reaction you did, because, like, watching...
Like, I know when a story isn't going
watching
somewhere.
This movie is agony.
Yeah,
and especially,
it is so tedious.
And the thing is I don't want to say poisoning the well, but like it's you can't separate this movie from Chinatown, and why would you? It wouldn't exist without Chinatown. And I wonder, like, part of me is like, well, if this movie were just some kind of like standalone noir, what would it be like? And I'm like, you know what? I can't fucking tell you, because like there's this giant black shadow looming over it called Chinatown. And in light of that movie, it's like, wow, this is a fucking joke. Like, really?
Yeah, it's regardless of Chinatown, it is an unremarkable movie.
Yeah.
And then to heap that on top of it, you're just like, I don't know, man.
And, to wrap up, I will say, like, I logged this on Letterboxd, gave it 1.5 stars. And the other thing I noticed...
What's the half a star for? Madeline Stowe's unhinged performance?
Well, honestly, it's the way that she was, struggling, like in a knockdown, drag-out struggle with Giddy's assistant, or one of his assistants, and she still managed to hold on to her cigarette.
That's dedication.
That's a very talented woman.
Already got one going, Mrs. Mulray.
I mean, we can debate. That's
a great little moment.
That's so good. That tells
nothing.
It tells you something about the character. It's like alluding to something, which is like not quite as it seems.
Yeah,
but
nothing even approaching that in this movie.
But like I was saying, you may disagree with me on my rating, but I will say this: when I went on Letterboxd and I logged this movie, every time I log a movie that we cover for the show, some of my mutuals have watched it and rated it already.
Mm-hmm.
None of my mutuals on Letterboxd have bothered to either watch or rate this film.
What? Yeah, better for them. It's a waste of time.
Yeah, they're smarter than I am. But we already knew that.
Well, you keep good company. That's the important thing.
Well, that's the 2 Jakes. I think we're done.
I think that is enough Jakes for a lifetime.
Yeah. We didn't even talk about the time. Do you remember the time when Jack Nicholson, like, fucked up that guy's car with a golf club?
No, was this in the movie, or?
No, like, in the 90s, he had, like, a road rage incident where he, like, accused... he got out of his car and accused the other guy of cutting him off, and then, like, put speed holes in his trunk with a golf club.
Right what you know, I guess.
I guess so.
Hey, the Giddies is a golfer too. It's difficult to disentangle, the actor from the role in this case, because it just seems like it's Jack Nicholson just kind of playing himself.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because, like, the Nicholson of the 70s was one of the best actors of his time. Mm-hmm. And, was left an incredible body of work from that era. And you don't see the cartoon Jack in Chinatown. I mean, he has the presence. He is Jack Nicholson. It's a Jack Nicholson performance, but he's Jake Giddies. But in this one, it's like, hey, like, what if you went to Six Flags and you said, I don't want you to do, like, you went to the caricature booth and you're like, I don't want a caricature of me. Can I know you can draw him because, like, he's pretty easy to caricature. Can you draw me a caricature of Jack Nicholson? And then the caricaturist drew, like, old, fat, bloated, sweaty, mouth-breathing 1990 Jack Nicholson.
Peak form.
Yeah. God bless him.
All right. So, okay, you suggest a movie next time. How about that? Hello, this is Hitler.